Hello class, I hope you all would be good. And now for today's class, we would say that how come the leaves that we have got in case of the plants, so they are adapted for the photosynthesis. And we must keep this thing in our mind that if the photosynthesis would not happen in the plants, then ultimately the flow of the energy in the ecosystem, like from the producers to the other consumers, would stop and that would end the life. Now, since the plants they were autotrophs, and by the autotrophs, what we meant was that the plants they were making their own food, and that makes them producers. And if they have to carry out the photosynthesis, so that would happen where we know that would take place in the leaves. So that means that our approach or our concept of the leaf structure should be very much clear, and we must be able to link the parts of the leaf that how come they are adapted for performing the photosynthesis. And overall, we say is that these leaves of the plant that we have got, so they are one specialized organ. Okay, why they are organ? We will see in a while that in the leaf we have got multiple tissues, and all those tissues they are of different types. And those different type of the tissues, when they combine with one another, so they make this organ, and that organ would be the leaf. If I were to quickly highlight that what structures do we have in the case of the leaf? So in the leaf at the top we would have the cuticle, and this cuticle is waxy, or this has composition of this cuticle is made up of the fats. Then we have got the epidermis, and in the epidermis further we have the upper epidermis. Then we have the lower epidermis. In the upper epidermis and the lower epidermis, we have got these cells, and these cells they are the epidermal cells. No matter if they are in the lower epidermis or if they are in the upper epidermis, they would not photosynthesize. Why they do not photosynthesize? The reason is they would not have the chloroplasts in them having the chlorophyll pigment. Moving onward for the leaf, the other structure that we have in them would be the mesophyll cells. And the mesophyll cells, they are further categorized into two distinct types. We have the palisade mesophyll cells, then we have the spongy mesophyll cells. They are the photosynthesizing cells, both of these. The only difference is the palisade mesophyll cells, they do more photosynthesis as compared to the spongy mesophyll cells. Now we know that for the process of photosynthesis, there is a greater need of the water and the ions. So in the leaves, we will see that there would be the availability of the xylem. And some part of the plant, they don't photosynthesize, and they would always be in the need of sugars coming to them. So we will see that in the leaves, we also have got these phloem vessels. Like as we have seen in case of the cells in the upper and the lower epidermis that don't photosynthesize. So these xylem and the phloem, they again do not photosynthesize. The xylem would be transporting the water and the ions to the leaves, and the phloem would be translocating the amino acids and the sucrose from the leaf to the other part of the plant. Now, if I were to simply split this up, so the photosynthesizing cells that we have in the leaf, so they're palisade and the spongy mesophyll cells, and also the guard cells that we have in the lower epidermis, they would be photosynthesizing. And the non-photosynthesizing would be the cells of the epidermis, the cuticle again would not photosynthesize. The vascular bundles, the xylem and the phloem, they would not photosynthesize. If I were to take you to be understanding the structure of this leaf, so here you see as that for the leaf at the top I have got this cuticle. This is waxy cuticle. And here we have the upper epidermis. And in the upper epidermis, every individual cell that we have got, so this is epidermal cell, and we don't see any chloroplasts in them. So they are not photosynthesizing. Immediately below the upper epidermal cells, so we have these long, cylindrical, closely packed cells, and these are the palisade mesophyll cells. These palisade mesophyll cells, they have abundant chloroplasts in them, and when they have got abundant chloroplasts in them, that would allow them to be doing maximum of the photosynthesis. Now, moving onward, here you see these cells that we have, they again have the chloroplasts in them. But the content or the amount of the chloroplast that we see in the spongy mesophyll cells, this is very much less as compared to the content of the chloroplast that we have got in the palisade mesophyll cells. But another unique thing that we see within the spongy mesophyll cells is the presence of these air spaces. And when the air spaces come in these cells, so overall, this would make the spongy mesophyll cells. Spongy for a reason that we have abundant air spaces here. If I were to go down, so here again we have got the lower epidermal. lower epidermis, and each of the cell would be the lower epidermis cells. And here we have these cells with us. They usually appear the bean-shaped kind of the cells, and they are the guard cells. And they again have the chloroplasts in them, so they again photosynthesize. And an opening that we see in between the guard cells. So this is stomata. And here in the leaf at this point, we have got the vascular bundles. And as I have mentioned earlier, that the vascular bundle, they have the xylem and the phloem in them. The identification of this phloem and xylem is also important, but that would come in the other chapter of the transport in plants. So here you see that at the top we have the epidermal tissues, then we have these palisade tissues, then we have these spongy mesophyll cells combined together, so they would be making spongy mesophyll tissue. And likewise, we have this lower epidermal tissues at the bottom. So you see that here we have got multiple tissues. And when these multiple tissues, when they would combine with one another, so they would make leaf as an organ overall. And that organ has got one role to be performing, and that is the photosynthesis. Now, we will see on each and every part of this leaf that would basically contribute for the photosynthetic process. Now, you remember from the previous diagram that I have at the top this cuticle layer, and this cuticle layer is waxy in nature, or in other words, we say that this is made up of the fats. The good thing about the cuticle is that this is entirely transparent. So when this is transparent, so it would not hinder the movement of the light rays, but rather than the light rays, they would pass straight through this cuticle. And the other feature of this cuticle is that this is waterproof. So when this is waterproof, so as a result of that, the water which is coming in the xylem vessels, so it would be utilized in the palisade, it would be utilized in the spongy mesophyll cells, and less of it would be evaporate through the cuticle. So this would help to conserve the water so that most of the water should be used for the process of photosynthesis. Now the other situation is that immediately below the cuticle we have these epidermal cells, and these epidermal cells, they do not have any of the chloroplasts in them, so they are non-photosynthesizing cells. Now, not having the chloroplast is an advantage for us because in that way the light would pass through them and it would hit these palisade mesophyll cells, and it would maximize the rate of photosynthesis, and it would allow that most of the light should be carried to the palisade and the spongy mesophyll cells. Now, if I were to talk about the palisade mesophyll cell, so the structure of the palisade mesophyll cell is important in terms of photosynthesis. Now you see that here we have got the cell wall of palisade mesophyll cells. Immediately below that we have this cell membrane. We have got this large vacuole in them. And since this large vacuole is placed at the center and it is pushing the nucleus to the side. The other important thing is that for these palisade mesophyll cells, the number of the chloroplasts that we have in them is abundant, and these chloroplasts, they basically lie on the peripheries toward the boundaries. So that would again allow them that they should be absorbing maximum of the sunlight. So for the shape of the palisade cells, what we need to know is that they overall are cylindrical, and as we have seen in the above diagram here, that these palisade mesophyll cells, they are also closely packed. And other than that, they have got abundant chloroplasts, and so that would allow them to absorb the maximum sunlight, and they are located near to the top of leaf. So that would again increase their exposure to the sunlight. Now, moving onward, here what we have got next. Now, these are the spongy mesophyll cells, and comparative to the palisade mesophyll cells, they look more of a rough kind of a shape. Okay, like a bit of the rounded shape which they have in them. Now, for these spongy mesophyll cells, this is their cell wall. Here comes their cell membrane. Then we have their large vacuole coming here, and then we have their nucleus here, and they have also got the chloroplast in them. But comparative to the palisade mesophyll cells, the number of the chloroplasts in the spongy mesophyll cells would be less. Now, since these spongy mesophyll cells, they had multiple air spaces or a lot of air spaces in them, so that is why they are termed as spongy. And they have a contribution not only in the photosynthesis, but since they have the air spaces in them, so they would also allow for the gaseous exchange to take place. And with context to the photosynthesis, we can never forget about these guard cells that we have with us. Overall, these guard cells, they are bean shaped. They have their cell wall here, and then they would have their cell membrane here. And then at the center again, we have got their large vacuole, and then the nucleus would be pushed toward the side. Other important thing is that these guard cells, they also have these chloroplasts in them. They would absorb the sunlight and likewise they would also photosynthesize. Now the situation is that these guard cells, they have to become turgid. By the turgid, what we mean is that the water has to enter into these guard cells, and when the large vacuole would increase in size, so it would exert the pressure on the cell wall. And the cell wall, when it would exert an opposing pressure on this large vacuole, so these guard cells they become turgid. And when they become turgid, then the air spaces that we have between them, the stomata, they would open up, and the carbon dioxide gas would go on the inside of the leaf, and the oxygen gas it would diffuse out of the leaves. So this is how each and every cell that we have got or the tissue that we have got in the leaves, they are rendering their role for the process of photosynthesis. Likewise, we must be also relating the xylem vessels and the phloem vessels, that how what role they have got in context of the photosynthesis. Now the xylem vessels that I showed you above, so they were bringing the water in the eyes. Why we need to bring the water here? Because water is one of the raw material for the photosynthesis. And the other thing is that these xylem vessels, they also bring some of the ions in them. Among the ions, we have magnesium ions coming. That would be making the chlorophyll. And along with that, there would be coming up of some other ions as well. And these ions by name, they go as a nitrate ions. And these nitrate ions, they would be combining with the glucose molecules and we would make amino acids out of it. So the xylem vessels, in terms of their contribution in terms of the photosynthesis, is bringing off the water in the ions. Because if we don't bring the magnesium ions to them, we can't make the chlorophyll pigments and we can't allow for the chloroplast to photosynthesize. And then again, we have got the contribution of the phloem over here as well. These phloem vessels in context of the leaf, they would take the sucrose and amino acids from the leaves and then ultimately they would carry it to the sink of the plant. And by the sink of the plant, what we mean is that that part of the plant that don't photosynthesize or to where the sucrose and the amino acid would be carried to. So here is a short summary of what I have said above, that how come each and every component of the leaf is adapted for photosynthesis. So the leaf overall, they have a large surface area, and when we make a large surface area, so it would enhance the diffusion of the carbon dioxide gas, and it would also bring about a lot of absorption of light for the photosynthesis. The leaves, overall, we say they are thin. By thin, the carbon dioxide would diffuse more into these leaves. We have got these chlorophyll in the leaves that would absorb the light energy for photosynthesis, and then in the leaves, you see that we have got the network of the veins. And this network of the veins ensure that each and every part of the leaf, it gets an adequate supply of the water and the ions. Then we have seen in case of the stomatas that these stomatas, they are basically a kind of an opening that we have in between the guard cells. And they allow the CO2 to diffuse in and the O2 to diffuse out. Other than that, as I have said, that the epidermis that we have got is thin and transparent. So that means that it would allow the light to reach toward the palisade cells. And these palisade cells, since they have abundant chloroplasts, so it would allow maximum of the photosynthesis to occur. Then we had this thin cuticle. We know that this not only protect the leaves from the harmful radiation, but would also prevent the loss of water through the cuticle. The palisade cells that we have got in the leaves, so they are located near to the top of the leaf so that the light can hit its chloroplast directly. And then the spongy layer, as I have said, I'm summarizing it, that it would allow most of the carbon dioxide to be diffusing into the leaf and O2 to go out of the leaf. And the vascular bundles, they not only support the stem and the leaf, but they also are transporting the water ions and the sucrose and the amino acids. So I hope you would be clear that how come the leaf that we have in the plants, it would be allowing for the maximum photosynthetic process.